Hello, everyone. Well, while the war continues both in Ukraine and in Russia, warehouses keep blowing up. Postal ones, Wildberries, Nova Poshta, oil refineries, gas processing stations, and so on and so on. There is a relatively peaceful country and a supranational entity, and both are destroying themselves. I'm talking primarily about Europe, which is cornering its own industry, and China plays a significant role in this. Before we start looking into all of this, there's a lot of interesting stuff. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any important news that matters to you. Now, let's get started. Watch. Europe is being warned about China's devastating trade blow to entire industries in Europe, and the problems here are really significant. Entire European industries could be affected, from the automotive and machinery sectors to chemicals, pharmaceuticals, and green energy. Along with them, hundreds of jobs. Well, that's everything. It's relevant because China first makes logistics and production chains dependent on itself, initially by offering very low prices for goods, and then, when customers have nowhere else to go, the prices go up. And in other countries, accordingly, those logistics chains and industrial systems no longer exist because China has taken all of that over. But there's a lot of this, and as a result, the problem keeps repeating. The first wave was in the early 2000s when entire sectors of American industry, not European industry, were being destroyed, and in Europe things will be even worse. The numbers they're showing us here are quite telling. The thing is, China's share in global manufacturing grew from 6% in 2000 to almost 30%, while the EU's share dropped from 30% to 17%. So this is a huge shift, and there's nothing good here for Europe. There's also a surplus with China and the EU. $1 billion. And Chinese industry, let's talk about it now, is losing 10,000 jobs every month. This is a huge and powerful blow to Europe, which, nevertheless, continues to send its money directly to Ukraine to supply all sorts of stuff, drones, pink flamingos, and other fortification structures like these. They're telling us that the Chinese shock for Europe will be, well, you could say similar to what we experienced in the 1990s, those of us who grew up and were born in the former USSR countries. And here, this is what they're saying. The relationship between the EU and Beijing is like a giant container ship 400 meters long with 24,000 containers sailing to Europe and then returning almost empty because hardly anyone takes anything from Europe. And as a result, all these powerful leaders are starting to take some measures, but overall, it's already quite late. France has proposed introducing tariffs of 30%. Partaginos SMR has stated the need to take action, and the EU has imposed tariffs ranging from 17 to 35% on Chinese electric vehicles. As if this will help the European automotive industry get out of the crisis, a crisis that many have driven the European industry into. Probably for years, you could say. I'm a witness to all of this myself because there's nothing good happening with the automotive industry in Europe right now. And then, what do they tell us? In order to have any chance to resist, we need maximum unity. In general, these strong statements keep being broadcast everywhere, but a statement is just a statement. Japan, South Korea, Brazil, the most European country in the world, Malaysia and Turkey should all consolidate their efforts. And Beijing can respond to European tariffs and cut off supplies of crucial raw materials, after which things will get even worse. Well, in general, something strange is happening. Meanwhile, while Europe is planning to introduce tariffs again on electric cars from China, there's nothing good happening with its own automotive industry. Volkswagen is cutting 100,000 jobs, and they say there could be even more. And protests have started in Germany, which most likely won't lead to anything. About 100,000 employees around the world are set to be laid off. This is the biggest restructuring, the biggest round of layoffs. Actually, the word restructuring isn't quite right here. In the almost century-long history of the company, and now the scale of the layoffs could even double. That's what I mentioned at the beginning. On July 9th, there were mass protests which didn't lead to anything, and now we're being shown that Volkswagen employs a total of 630,000 people. Well, if you subtract 200, it will be 430. That's 60 more than Toyota, but it's still getting smaller and smaller. People are asking why the company ended up in crisis because it was late switching to electric cars. And that's exactly when Chinese manufacturers were gaining momentum and winning technical advantages and their place in the sun. As a result, there was a drop in sales in China for these very cars from Europe, and a drop in profits as well. The labor union organized protests, dissatisfied employees came out, but it will still have to be closed. So, in its 88-year history, Volkswagen has never once stopped production in its homeland, that is, in Germany. And now it's stopping laying off Germans who will apparently have to go on various benefits and other things that aren't too pleasant for them. Well, now we're being told that it's not just Volkswagen that has a problem. We're talking about a systemic crisis in the entire German automotive industry. Mercedes-Benz is planning to cut several thousand jobs, as are Bosch and some other companies. Meanwhile, in Merz's rhetoric, he's like, well, whatever, some cars, who cares? Let's produce tanks instead. Tanks are what we really need. Tanks, missiles, or we can buy missiles from the US at an exorbitant price. Why not? We'll free ourselves from some obligations. Well, and the Bundeswehr is expanding the territorial defense division. Apparently, they'll be recruiting from the people who are now being laid off, or rather, those being laid off by Volkswagen. Here we're told that by 2035, the number of people in the Bundeswehr's territorial defense division should exceed 10,000. Where they will find these tens of thousands of people is still unclear, because even written mailings haven't worked. There was even an appeal from the army to civilians asking if they would join the army if they had to serve. Well, almost 99% answered no. And when invitations were sent out for military service training, only about 600 people out of 10,000 responded. In other words, it's expanding quickly. Everyone is clearly interested in the war. The numbers should exceed that. At the moment, they say we're aiming for a strength of 6,500 servicemen. The division will become twice as strong as it is today. As part of this reinforcement, territorial defense battalions will be formed, defense and support battalions. Actually, all of this started to take shape in April of 25. That is, all of this, of course, has been cobbled together in a hurry. And it has been left or put in a state of semi-readiness, like a half-finished product, because things like this can't be done off the cuff. Years of preparation are required. And there could be as many as 10 billion people listed in this territorial defense. But the problem is effectiveness. So, what will the territorial defense do? If you ask most people what they would do if war suddenly breaks out, they'll say, I'm tired, as they say. Naturally, people will either keep lying on the couch, so to speak, or leave the country. Because most Europeans, when asked what they would do if they were drafted, said, we'll leave. The world is big, the world is small, there's still fuel for now. And it doesn't cost a fortune yet. So you can fly away, leave, or even sail away if it comes to that. That's exactly what people will do. Then, there's an even more significant process, which is the potential process of Ukraine joining the European Union. It obviously should strengthen the economic aspect. That is, maybe you've seen photos or artists' illustrations of how a black hole sits next to a regular star, and it absorbs its matter. There, for example, a huge star is depicted and a small black one, and gradually all the matter moves from the main star to the black one. Well, about the same thing will happen with the EU budget. Ukraine needs more and more money. Already, those 90 billion that are supposedly being allocated, the powerful leaders of Ukraine say that's not enough. We need 120 or better yet, 150. And if they were given $1 trillion, they would have already cleared a path all the way to Turup or somewhere else. They would have walked there on foot, taking their time and looking in all directions. It's absolutely impossible to understand where Europe gets so much money. Still, they promise to accept Ukraine into the European Union, but of course with some conditions. For example, a certain special rapporteur of the European Parliament, Michael Gala, said that as long as the war continues, Ukraine cannot become a full member of the EU. But, judging by what Zelensky says, he suggests we should prepare for 2029, for 2030, and that we still have children growing up, those who remain, so we can replenish our military forces. Looking at this, it's clear there won't be any EU accession for at least 5 years. Ukraine can't simply become a full member of the EU because that would automatically mean other countries would be obligated to take Ukraine's side in the war. But, he tells us, this scenario doesn't necessarily mean defeat, but in this case Moldova might become a member of the European Union before Ukraine. And this will immediately increase trust in the process itself. But, in short, another powerful country is joining the European Union. I think it should be Uganda. to add Siberia and Ivory Coast and add a couple more powerful military economic complexes that will help the European Union stay afloat. And then we can really do something substantial. But what exactly? Well, we can make roadmaps, change them every year, and say, oh, the reality is different. Let's urgently change everything. And then we're told that Ukraine continues to be that same steel porcupine. Moldova isn't and never was. But nevertheless, they want to accept Moldova more willingly than Ukraine. Now they're talking about justice, because if Moldova moves faster towards the EU, that's not justice. If Ukraine is accepted, that would be justice. But then they tell us how all of this could happen, and if Moldova is accepted, supposedly it will better prepare the EU for Ukraine's membership. Don't ask why, how, or where this will happen. This is the EU's preparation for accepting Ukraine, but that's what they say. As for Ukrainians, it seems like they've already stepped into the European Union with one foot. Well, or at least they've stepped into something. Just don't forget to wipe your shoe afterward. And Ukrainians are no longer wanted in Germany, the very engine of the European economy. They say that some Ukrainians in Germany might lose their automatic protection. These are primarily Ukrainian men who are subject to military service. And this was already brought up by the German Minister of the Interior, Alexander Dobrindt. He supported the idea of removing Ukrainian men subject to military service from the Europe-wide protection mechanism, and he stated that evading military service cannot be grounds for asylum. So basically, if a person doesn't want to die, why would they need protection? Go die. What are you afraid of? Over there, as those various unit commanders and the rest say, yeah, well, we don't need fighters or assault troops. We need drone operators, cooks, economists over there. Tram drivers. Someone else is needed there too. But definitely not assault troops. Apparently, assault troops fight forever. They have a certain roster. No one is accepted there. No one leaves. Well, that's based on what we're told about replenishing the units. That assault troops, it's just rumors that they send people there to fight right away. And there's no need to storm the tree lines. That's probably why they're planning to deport Ukrainian men liable for military service from Europe. So, Dobrindt reminded that until now, Ukrainians automatically receive protection under the Mass Refugee Directive. But for Syrians, it's different. They are checked individually. So where did over 1 million Syrians in Germany come from then? It's impossible to understand. Individually checking that many documents would take an endless amount of time. Nevertheless, here's what they write. If the directive on mass influx is no longer applied to men of conscription age and there is no positive decision in the asylum procedure, there is a logical consequence. These people will be required to enter Ukraine. They want to bring back those who didn't make it in time, but as they say, if you didn't make it, you're too late. As far as we can tell, starting from March 2027, this temporary protection will no longer be available not only for men liable for military service, but also for women liable for military service. But those who made it before that deadline, as they say, got really lucky. Got lucky in a good way with a positive connotation. As the saying goes, the early bird gets the worm. Well, the Germans say, at least these powerful German leaders say, that politically it's justified. This is appropriate regarding a country that we largely support militarily so that it can organize resistance against Putin's aggressive war. They're having others pull chestnuts from the fire, sending back those Ukrainians who fled to avoid doing it in Ukraine. Sending them back. Well, why not? Besides, we're being told that in part this is already happening in the United Kingdom. There's a new leader now, by the way. He looks like Tishchenko, that Ukrainian guy. But it's just swapping one thing for another, because in part, it's about solidarity with Ukraine. He's one of the most active among British politicians. They talk about continuity here, meaning Starmer or what's his name, Burnham. Basically, it seems there's no difference. Starmer has been a consistent and clear-eyed supporter of Ukraine. And any successor will inherit the same set of challenges, from the weaker US guarantees in Europe to the need for collective European defense. So, if this Prime Minister does indeed take office, he will continue the great work of the great Starmer. And then continue to destroy, in the sense of rebuilding the European-Ukrainian economy, and apparently rebuild it in such a way that no one will be left unaffected. As for Ukrainians, the document requirements for temporary protection have changed. And the European Union countries have extended it until March 4, 2028. But as I said, for new applicants, the conditions related to military service in Ukraine apply. To obtain temporary protection, new applicants will need to confirm that they have fulfilled the relevant military obligations. That is, either you have already served and been demobilized, or you are unfit for military service, or something else. Well, there may be some nuances there. In short, it's clear that things are unclear. We'll see how it develops and whether they can even implement it in different countries. But judging by the fact that this is a unified voice and not just a lone cry in the wilderness, most likely that's how it will be. So for those who haven't managed yet, well, how do you not make it in time at all? So if you need to, you should start thinking now. What to do, how and where to go. Well, for now, let's take a look at the magnificent leaders who are eager to share their wisdom with us. Here, for example, we have Meru Slavai telling us something from his little car, as usual. Apparently, wow, his facial muscles are already well developed. Each time it's somehow getting more and more pronounced. Soon he'll have to buy a camera with a wide-angle lens, because next time it might not fit. And we won't see the beautiful face of this wise character in a khaki t-shirt. And we won't be able to hear what he's saying. He's talking about mobilization and once again starts talking about Israel. I don't know why they're so bothered by Israel, but he starts saying, like, look at this.
Look, I don't know. You hire people on Telegram to stage provocations, offering $100 or $200 to meet a mobilization officer or mark something for you.
Or yes, exactly those people who get beaten by mobilization officers, have their arms broken, their kidneys and liver smashed, even killed. Those are the ones who supposedly go after the mobilization officers. Yes, so look, here sits this guy who lives off Ukrainian taxpayers, and he's saying that those very Ukrainians who support him are all sellouts. They get paid in dollars, then argue with the mobilization officers.
Make a video about them. We're much more lenient about mobilization than countries like Israel or the United States. If you attacked a serviceman performing his duties in the United States of America or in Israel, you would simply be shot.
No, but what does a serviceman have to do with this? He probably means police officers. Besides, draft office staff are not servicemen, which we've already mentioned many times. This is basically some kind of public organization where there are these people snatchers, and this guy keeps talking. Chevron removed the chevrons from his car's ceiling. I recall they all used to hang there, apparently.
Well, the US police would just pull out a gun and shoot Zeleny the same way.
Look, uncle, police and military personnel are different things. They're different services. They're different organizations. How can a deputy not understand that the police are one thing and the military is another? I just can't wrap my head around it. The level of incompetence is so great that apparently it can only fit in this big, mighty face with a complicated expression.
They don't just bundle people into vans there, they use buses. The military, police, and armored vehicles are harshly using special means to catch and force those liable for military service into the army.
It would be one thing if this guy was talking about something like this 70 or 80 years ago, when the only means of communication were some newspapers and radios, some of which were jammed, and not only in the Soviet Union but in other countries too. But now there is such a thing, and this is for the information of this very high Miroslav, noise is high, basically high from Shumi, he made some noise. There is such a thing as the internet. The internet is a worldwide network that connects computers in different countries. And it allows you to transfer information from one computer to another, and even to phones now, and there are even satellites that also allow information exchange and speed up this process. So, just for Guy's information, in case he ever watches this, maybe he still doesn't know and is still sending telegrams to his relatives, like to Israel or somewhere else. Well, so, one person sitting in front of a computer screen or holding a phone in their hands can communicate with another person and read the news. And see what's happening in the world and look up information, for example, about what's happening in Israel, how the draft works there or in the US. And then it becomes clear that Guy, well, honestly, he should be writing fairy tales for adults. And even then, I don't think he would become a popular storyteller because, well, there should at least be some grain of truth. But anyway, now we have some old man by the name of Tsibulko telling stories. And Tsibulko is talking to Cyber Lenin on the left, let's imagine. It was young Lenin, then young Elton John, and now it's Cyber Lenin. So Cyber Lenin is talking to Tsibulko and discussing what's going on with Zaluzhny. Remember that? Good morning, good morning. Good morning to you, good morning, good morning. I'm glad to see you, says Zaluzhny. And at the same time, he adds a little digression. Digression. They even rub their hands like this. In short, he speaks English perfectly. All right, now let's take a look at another character from our unwritten novel. His name is Tsibulko. Tsibulko is talking to Cyber Lenin. Cyber Lenin is on the right. Tsibulko is with, oh, right. Cyber Lenin is on the left from your perspective. Tsibulko is on the right. And they're talking about what a great leader this Zaluzhny is. The author of the famous saying is Gurmonin. The original pronunciation is preserved, but overall, apparently it should sound like Gurmonin, Gurmonin, Gurmonin. Gurmonin to you, Gurmonin, Gurmonin, I'm glad to see you. And he adds a little digression. Then he rubs his hands and says digression. In short, he understands the nuances of the English language like an Englishman straight from the suburbs of Liverpool itself. Well, let's listen to what Tsibulko will say to Cyber Lenin.
Right now, the situation is more difficult for Zaluzhny. There is a lot of sympathy from people for his experience, his results, and his work.
So, do you sympathize with Zaluzhny's experience and with him personally? Write in the comments and leave a like. Moreover, at the most difficult moment for the country, he took responsibility upon himself. You might say that Zelensky took it upon himself. Oh, for God's sake, don't make me laugh.
Don't make me laugh, thank you. Whatever he takes on, responsible people will be in their positions. Accountant and subtitler Olia. He gained experience at others' expense while undermining his own position. Doctors and Ambassador Minkiva.
Lenin woke up, looked carefully at the screen, saw that nothing interesting was happening. Tsibulko was still on the air, and he went on to browse some websites, maybe sites of a rather interesting kind. Maybe he's checking out what kind of products Kuleba's wife has, the notorious one in downtown Kiev who has a store with an interesting focus.
Remove that and use this one. It's one of the best.
Well, that's how it is. The best, in short, one of the best ambassadors either of Ukraine in the UK or among all ambassadors in general. Such a wonderful ambassador that, as an ambassador to the UK, he didn't even get expelled. He's still there showing his patriotism. He talks about how it's not scary to die. Well, that's it. Goodbye, everyone.